Hello, this is Yayoi Komiyama from Brain to Belly. Welcome to the Spanglish World Networks on Zingo TV channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the Zingo TV app on the respective app stores in iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to leave a rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, and Fire TV sticks, Roku and Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 and forward. So welcome today. And today I have a special guest. His name is Matthew Detrick. Is that correct? Did I pronounce it correct? I'm hoping.
Detrick,
I
Detrick, same thing.
Dietrich. Yes, and he is a fellow neuroencoding specialist, and we've become closer in the last probably last year, six months, yeah.
Mhm.
And I had the privilege of meeting him actually in April in Atlanta when we had a conference, and he's been part of my group, close inner circle group of neuroencoders, and I wanted him to come here today to share his journey and how thought really changes so much about how you act and the strong influence it has on your body. So,
Mm.
welcome, Matthew, and please share, yeah, introduce yourself, and let's get talking.
Cool, thanks, Yayoi. Yeah, I remember joining the Neuroencoding Institute, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, they're having a live event already! It's in like 2 months." And then I met you there, and just the warm welcome I received, which is so awesome. And then being able to work with you on the member engagement committee, helping out people, and being on like the calls, it's super rewarding, because we're able to really help people go further faster and be all that they want to be,
Yes.
especially in this world of like, oh my gosh, all this stuff's going on and these distractions, and we're able to really provide a positive, thriving environment to them. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. I'm super happy to be here. I'm part of the Neuroencoding Institute. I've been learning about neuroencoding, and just like you always said, about how our thoughts create our feelings, and how our feelings create how we show up in the world, which causes us to do something and then get the results that we have. So,
Yeah.
yeah, super excited to be here with you today.
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for coming. And I know that you yourself had your own journey to finding clarity and finding calm in your life. And I know that neuroencoding has helped you quite a bit in that part as well. And could you tell us a little bit about that and share a little bit about yourself there?
Absolutely. So I joined the military fresh out of high school. So I graduated in 2000. And instead of doing like a lot of normal, if there's a normality in the world anymore,
I don't know.
instead of taking some time and figuring out things, I just kind of jumped straight into the military.
Wow.
Brother was a Marine. Dad was in the Army in Vietnam. Brother was in the first Gulf War. He was on ships, so he didn't have to serve anywhere, which was a
Hmm.
great thing. So I went in, and you go in thinking, well, maybe I might have to deploy somewhere because that's kind of part of the job, right?
Right.
But I didn't really, none of us really want to go anywhere,
Right. I agree.
So, yeah, I don't know if everybody remembers. So back in 2003, before that, the world was a totally different place.
Yes.
In 2001, 9/11 happened. Everything just changed in an instant. I
It
remember when
did.
my brother went to boot camp, you used to be able to go past security with them in the airport.
Uh-huh.
And I remember
Yes.
seeing him off.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah. And right after that happened, in the blink of an eye, suddenly, all the security is happening. You have to get double checked and triple checked and sometimes frisked. And it's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
whoa.
I remember that too, because I used to, travel a lot to Japan because I live
Mhm.
here in New York, and then I remember when 9/11 happened. I mean, it was just instantly security was so tight, and just traveling was such a difficult thing to do. And you had to give yourself so much more extra time because you knew that you were going to have to line up in security and let's see. I wasn't a US citizen at that time yet. So I was still a green card holder. So I knew that I had, I was going to get extra security. Yeah. So I would have to go through so much more. So I remember getting all that extra time and worrying about what I could bring into the on board and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine for you that was a total world change, right? Because you probably, I don't know what, because I didn't travel that much when I was younger, but I imagine especially traveling internationally to Japan and back on a green card, like I bet, I just have a question for you about
Yeah.
that. Were people suspecting of you? Because I think like the people that drove were in the planes that crashed them into the tower. All of a sudden, people are like, "Well, we're suspicious about everybody," which I'm like, "Well, wait a minute. That was a group of people. That wasn't everybody."
Yeah.
Did you feel like it was? How was it different for you?
Um, Fortunately, I think Japanese people or yeah, it wasn't as strict. And I was very lucky,
Yeah.
maybe. But I remember it was just in general, it was very strict for anyone. And I did feel a little bit like because I'm not a US citizen, how am I going to be looked at? Um, how is like security going to look at me? Are they going to doubt me? Things like that.
Mhm.
So I did have thoughts like that running through my head for sure. Like
Mhm.
until then, I never even thought about that. That was like,
Right.
yeah, you're like, okay, just have to get through security, and that's not a big deal. And like you were saying, people would see you off right at the gates, and now that's like unthinkable, right?
Right.
But I remember like you'd hang out with your family, you'd hang out with friends at the gate until your flight was to boarding. So I remember those days, and it's like right now if you say that they're like, "What?" You know, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a point to why I'm asking this, which we'll probably get to later in the conversation. But it's kind of interesting. We have a paradigm and a way of being.
Yes.
And so for me, even as a US citizen, it was weird and uncomfortable because I ended up, so boot camp was in California. And at the
Okay.
time, we had lived in Oregon, but my parents moved back to the Chicagoland area.
Okay.
So that's where I went after. So I went to boot camp and then radio school, and then I took a vacation after that. And I remember watching, like, coming out of the room I was staying in, and I thought my parents were watching a movie. And so all of
Oh,
these thoughts about the world safe and the world I can trust people and all these things were kind of shattered in an instant.
yeah.
And so I ended up driving instead of flying a car. So it's roughly about probably somewhere between 2100, so 2,100 miles and 2,500 miles all the way back to California.
Wow.
I can't imagine what that would have been like if I would have flown. But the point is then the world went from like no security on bases to all of a sudden people are in flak jackets and helmets and
Right.
rifles and all these things. And then fast forward to when we finally deployed overseas. And then there was an incident that happened. And it wasn't, they always tell you if you go through things, how one person sees it is not the same how another person sees it, and never compare,
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote, one trauma to another.
Right.
But for me, when I was, let's see, that would have been 2003. So I would have been 21. And I grew up in Wheaton, Illinois. So it's very suburban and it's very safe. And there's not a whole lot going on. It's a small town.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, there were things like a bombing happened, which nobody was hurt, but still, it's kind of like, whoa.
Yeah.
Um, and then instantly, you kind of feel like, oh, I'm helpless, I'm hopeless. What do I do? How do I live in the world now?
Yeah.
And so for years after that, I dealt with it, and I think a lot of veterans do, whether that's drugs, alcohol, many ways that could manifest, right?
Yes.
Because I didn't know any better at the time. So for many, many years, I think, what we have at the Neuroencoding Institute is so amazing because it allows us to choose our thoughts and be conscious about what we choose.
Exactly.
Whereas back then, I'm like, oh my gosh, everything's happening to me, and I'm a victim of my circumstance, and all of these things.
Yes.
So I kind of did, and again, it's common for vets to kind of, I drifted for a while, in and out
Mm-hmm.
of different jobs,
Right.
in and out of different relationships,
Mm-hmm.
isolation, things like that. Totally unproductive. But I think there was a reason I went through all of that, so I could. I wish nobody had to go through that kind of stuff.
I agree. I agree.
But I think that when we do, it helps us become more resilient, and we have a lesson we can share with people later on.
Yeah.
So,
And you gain more empathy and empathy for others that
mhm,
are struggling, because I know that um, my journey, even I have a totally different journey, but it was more like a culture shock type of thing that happened for me, and finding my identity, what you believe in. And like you said, with techniques that we've learned through neuroencoding, we've learned that our thoughts can be controlled, that we can change our thoughts. So whatever, I always say you can rewire your brain. And I really believe that. And I think the evidence was in neuroencoding, in that when we learned all the techniques that we can use in neuroencoding, we were able to slowly change, well, not slowly, actually pretty quickly, change the way we think about things. So for instance, since my specialty is on changing relationship with food, it would be like, but it usually stems from a lack of confidence in yourself and a lack of love for yourself. And even just changing the way you see yourself, and to be more compassionate with yourself, or
mhm,
have more empathy for yourself instead of beating yourself up. Like I remember when my thing was, whenever I got frustrated or upset, I would just turn to food, and food would be my immediate
mhm,
solace, right? That was my friend. And but I think that I was able to change that to say, well, what is it that I'm really after? It's comfort, right? And food isn't really
mhm,
going to give me the comfort I want. And just that realization and that acknowledgement changes so much in your brain. And you're like, well, what can I do instead of that? And when you're in the when you're in that situation, you don't think that way. But when you gain that little bit of awareness, or like someone says, oh, that's a new way of thinking, you're like, wait a minute, maybe that'll work for me, because you're so desperate. And I know, like, when I was
mhm,
depressed, I suffered from depression for a long time, and that came from also the weight and all this and that. But when you're depressed, you're like, there's no way out of this deep dark hole, right?
mhm.
And like I said one time, you see the light up there, but you're like, it's so far up. How am I going to get to it, right?
Yeah.
And then neuroencoding kind of gives you that, it opens up that light, and it even gives you that ladder to climb up, so
Mhm.
that you can get to the light and you could get out of that hole. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Hey,
mhm,
you said something in there that it's very interesting how we
okay.
work as people, right? As you talked about identity, and it's almost like you talked about weight in terms of physical weight, but I imagine as you're going through things like you're talking about, it's almost like there's a metaphorical weight, because we feel like, people say, I feel like I'm behind a brick wall, or I'm
Yeah.
overloaded, or it's interesting how people talk in metaphors.
Yes.
And if you listen closely, when we work with people and we coach people, if you listen, kind of one of the videos actually that Joseph has is he talks about how to understand what people aren't telling you,
Yes.
right? And it's like, oh wow, when you're describing the whole, I'm like, oh, I don't know what that's like, but if you think about seeds, when they grow, they start underground,
Yeah.
and they don't know, they just grow.
Hmm.
But as humans, it's like we feel this weight, and it's like, well, we don't know what to do with that. What do we do?
Yeah.
And that's where I think what you're talking about, for me, that's where it manifested in things like the drinking and the drugs, because it's like, oh, I
Hmm.
feel this release,
Yeah.
and I don't feel the weight temporarily. But of
Exactly.
course, everything's still there the next day, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This-
Yeah. It's
yeah.
sadly it's there. And but once you Gosh, so what really helped you? I'm just
Mm.
curious now. What really helped you to get out of that and change? What triggered the change for you?
Well, I think
If you
the
don't mind
first
my asking.
absolutely, I think that's a great question, and I wish that was a conversation more people were willing to have and to kinda look at those things. I think we could be helpers to each other along the way. I think if I look at so it took a while, because I was around people that didn't understand this kinda stuff, and so I remember years and years and years ago, I forget what year it was exactly, but somehow I found a Tony Robbins tape set of his Personal Power, like the original
Yes.
cassette tapes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember those.
Mhm. I think it was on eBay, if I remember correctly. So I remember putting it on, and my whole family thought I was nuts, but I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna try this out, and I'm gonna see what it's like. I felt a little nuts probably doing it because I'm like, this is weird. I'm flying around my room like I'm like Superman, but the whole like it taught me how to change my state. So if
Yeah,
I'm feeling depressed, I do that a certain way, right? I'm
yeah.
like, my shoulders are slumped. I'm probably looking down a lot. Probably internally, I'm like, there's probably a loop of like, well, I don't know what to do. What do I do? And so when you use a thing like Tony was teaching us in a state change and you change how
Mhm.
your body feels, it's like,
Yes.
okay, well, how do I do happiness or joy or confidence even?
Yeah.
My shoulders are back. I'm sitting
Yeah.
up straight. I'm probably looking up and I'm thinking, I can already feel it.
Mhm.
It's like a switch that happens. And
Yeah.
it's like, if you think of your whole body as electricity, right? Because when our
Yep.
neurons fire in our brain,
Mhm.
it's an electrical
Yes.
connection.
Yes.
So if we can use our thoughts in those moments and realize we really do have control,
Yeah.
even though a lot of times it seems like we don't, right? Because
Yeah.
I think you mentioned something earlier too that's really fascinating about how humans work is we use things like you talked about food, and for me that was like different substances.
Mhm.
We think that's giving us comfort and we think that's keeping us safe. Like
Yeah.
for me, I used to isolate when I used at times, and I thought, well, if I use in my own house, therefore I'm safe. And somebody asked me along the way, but you're using by yourself. Were you really safe?
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Whoosh,
Good
no.
question. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where I think when we're learning coaching, one of the things we learn about is asking quality questions.
Yeah.
And I think when we can ask the question, is this really getting me comfort? Is this really getting me safety? We can be honest with ourselves, which I don't know about you, Yayoi, but for me, that's such a relief because
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, now I know, now I can do something about it. And now I can begin
Right.
to get out of this thing. And I think once we're able to be honest and have that awareness, that's really what helped me
Yeah.
start to climb out of the hole you were talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what it was a long journey. I had to go to 2 rehabs and things like that, but what did it for me, my faith's a big part of that too, but
Yes.
I think realizing that, oh, when I start going into these darker places that don't have the light and they feel like
Yes.
maybe they're underground,
Yes.
I can just have, we call it an anchor in our world. So
Right.
I can snap my fingers, I can clap, I
Yeah.
can go.
Yeah. Yeah, and like even to your point of how Tony Robbins when he says change your state, and
Mhm,
like you were saying, when you're depressed or when you're feeling the weight of the world or weight of whatever that you're feeling, your body is really like this. Your
mhm,
breathing is very shallow. You're looking down, and like what he says, which is an instant change, is just push your shoulders back, take a deep breath in, open up your chest, and just look up. And one thing that our mentor Joseph says is when you
mhm.
look up, you can't frown,
Right.
and all you do is want to smile. So even just doing that physical aspect of it can change so much of the electricity and the energy that's flowing within you,
Mhm.
that you open up a little bit to that energy, which is going to bring you more positivity and possibly bring you more light because it's bringing more electricity into your body,
Right.
So, and just that one little change can make a huge difference for someone.
Mhm.
And I don't know, any of the viewers that are watching and listening to this, if you feel like you're in that position of just hunched over and depressed, bring that shoulder back just a little bit and take
Mhm.
a deep breath in and open up the chest and see if that makes any difference at all for you,
Yeah.
because you will see that difference. And like I said, when you're looking up, you can't frown. It's very difficult to do it. I tried it.
Yeah.
And I've made people try doing it. I'm like, try frowning when you're looking up. It's very difficult to do.
Mhm. It totally is, because it's like, even when when I'm doing that along with you, and you're talking about bring your shoulders back and it opens up your chest, my
Yeah.
breathing instantly changes,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
And it's like a simple move that, I mean, I think Tony Robbins is ingenious when he said that changing your state comes from changing your physiology first, right?
Mhm.
Changing your body first. And that's like a simple, simple technique that anyone could use to really just start off changing that. And then your thoughts are going to start changing.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think it what you just said too, I think so many times, especially in the high achieving world, even in not in the high achieving world, just in
Hmm.
everyday life,
Yeah.
sometimes we think, well, I have to make this huge step and this huge evolution. You don't. You got to start somewhere. And I think what we're talking about, if you can just have a small win today, where if you can make yourself laugh and giggle,
Yes.
and you're like, and you're laughing. I've laughed at myself so many times trying to frown when I'm smiling, because I'm like, this is ridiculous. Why am I trying to fight it? Just allow myself to be joyful and giggle and be happy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah, because wow, when you're happy or when you're giggling, when you're smiling, when you're laughing, even if like it's something like you're watching some comedy show, or you're reading something that makes you laugh, that's humorous,
Hmm.
that joy that comes up from laughter is such a pure energy. It's a pure and beautiful energy that we can all have, and we can actually go to when we're in a sad state or in a depressed state.
Hmm.
If you could just take that one tiny step to get to that laughter can be contagious.
Absolutely. And I think it starts with a simple question too, right? I think
Hmm.
that when we're in those moments, we just have to ask ourselves, we have to dare to ask ourselves this question.
Yeah,
I think a lot of times we're hiding from it, but it's just, what do I want?
yeah,
And I think as humans, and myself included, I'm working on it and I've gotten a lot better at it. But we're very quick to say, well, here's everything I don't want. I don't want this thing and I don't want that. And it's like, well, and you realize, and you notice how my speech patterns get even faster, because inside it's like, well, I don't know. And then I get back to this overwhelmed state. To stop that, it's helpful to slow it down and say, well, really, what do I want?
yeah,
And if you say, well, I want to be able to connect with people. Well, that could mean so many different things. If you break that down to the simple, like, what does that mean? Do you just want
right,
to make eye contact, and is that enough to make that connection? When I smile at somebody, would I like for them to smile back?
right.
And if they don't, is that okay? And can I be content with just knowing that I contributed a smile to
Yeah,
them?
yeah.
'Cause I think that's still connection. You're
It
still
is.
taking an action.
Yeah. And like you said, it's those
Mhm.
small things that change and make a big difference for you, because smaller things as humans, it's easier for us to do, right?
Mhm.
When you say take a small step and you're like, I could do one thing, I could smile, or you're like, oh, okay, maybe I can watch something that's going to make me laugh, or I know I'm going to mention your puppies, but I know you have two little puppies right now, adorable. And for me, I mean, my dog is something that, when I see her, I smile because she just brings so much joy to me. And I'm
Mhm.
sure that's the same with you, with your little puppies. And it's like, or like watching your child, take a step, or even just watching your child just being,
Mhm.
herself or himself, can make you feel so much joy. And I think things like that, are little steps that we can be conscious of to take to create that joy in our life. Or like, I'm a firm believer in doing a gratitude journal,
Mm.
and every day, before I go to sleep, I believe me, I've fallen asleep with my journal and like my pen marks are like, I'm like, what did I write here? But it doesn't matter. At least
Mhm.
I'm doing it. And to me, the doing is important. And
Yeah.
even if it's just one thing or two things that I wrote that I was grateful for that day, it makes a huge difference in how I feel and how I go to sleep. I mean, going to sleep thinking of the joy that I had throughout the day, or the little joys or the little wins that I had throughout the day, is such a better way of going to sleep than thinking of all the things I have to do the next day. I remember those
Mm.
days when I would lie awake and I'm like, okay, I got to do this, I got to do that. How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? And I haven't done that in so long, but I remember when I was in high school, that's all I did. And like even college, I was like, I couldn't get to sleep because I was thinking of so many things that I had to do.
Mhm.
And I think, when you do a gratitude journal, or even if it's just writing one thing that brought you joy that day, and going to sleep just thinking about that can bring you into a better type of sleep. You wake up more refreshed and
Mhm.
in a better mood for sure. That's for sure.
Oh, absolutely, and I know they've done studies on this too, where when you're in a grateful, if you think of everything, let me back up a step. So when you think about the body and everything really, it has a certain frequency.
Yes.
And even when like you tune your radio, you tune it to 88.9 or 101.1. So gratitude is probably more along the lines of the 105 point something. And if you're on maybe 90.3 and you're like, oh, well, before I go to bed, I want to, and this is super important what you said. It's a way to reset our entire nervous system. And when we go to sleep in gratitude, even if it's
Yeah.
one thing, that it doesn't have to be 25 million things in
Oh,
the list. You can, one thing today that happened that I am grateful for, that you are grateful for before you go to bed. I don't have specific statistics, but I would be willing to make a bet that they have studies out there that show if you go to bed in gratitude or in thankfulness, you can't help but wake up in a much more refreshed state of mind,
yeah,
you
I'm
know?
positive of that. Yeah,
Mhm.
we have to we have to go do some research on that and
Yeah.
get some numbers, but I'm positive of that because I mean, we've experienced that, right, ourselves.
Mhm.
And I mean, being consistent in doing it, you will see a change in yourself and how you feel when you wake up. I don't know when the last time, gosh, since I started doing a gratitude journal, I don't think I've ever had a day when I got up and said, I don't want to get up.
Mm.
When I woke up and, said, I don't want to get out of bed because, yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about that. Have I? And I can't remember the last time. It was probably years ago when I was, in my depression, or when I was going through my eating disorder thing, or, when I felt like I don't want to get up.
Mm.
Because ever since I started thinking on gratitude, or going to sleep in a better mood, that has really changed the way I wake up. And I think, well, we know that sleep is such an important aspect to being healthy.
Mhm.
And I believe it's one of the five pillars of health, right? So getting good sleep is so important because our bodies and our minds and our souls really need to rest a little bit. And it's to
Mhm.
recharge. It's like, you charge your battery for your phone, right? Your phone needs to get recharged, or that it loses all of its energy. So it's the same thing. Our bodies need to recharge.
Mhm. Yeah, they've actually measured brain waves when you sleep. I think it's alpha, beta, delta, and then there's like
Theta.
gamma. Yeah.
Oh, mhm.
And to get to a restorative sleep, it's the REM sleep, the rapid eye movement, which
Yes.
actually does help recharge and regenerate cells and things like that.
Mhm.
And man, yeah, today in the world, there's so much to do. Like we have a phone that gives us instant access to information,
Yep.
which all this stuff has probably already always been going on, but now we know about it the second it happens. And it's like, even talking about it inside, I'm like, ah. If you remember that movie Home Alone where Kevin stands in front of the mirror and puts on aftershave and he's
Yes,
like,
I know.
it's like, if I go to bed like that, I'm gonna wake up the same way, and then it's just gonna repeat itself day after
Yeah.
day after day. So I just wanna say if anybody's watching today and you're in that state of mind where you have a million things to do, maybe you have kids on top of that, maybe
Mhm.
a relationship you're in is not as good as you'd like it to be, and that just
Right.
adds on top of things. I promise you that you still have control, even though it feels like you might not in the moment. And what you can do and what I encourage you to do, anybody that's watching this, is again, like Yayoi and I have talked about, just start with one thing.
Yeah.
Even if that's going to like look in the mirror, or if you don't have a mirror, if you take your phone, if it has a camera on it, and you turn the camera around and you look at yourself into it and just say, you know what? I love you today, and you're enough because you got through today, and you're telling yourself that. I'm already like, "Oh, wow, that's a different frequency altogether." It
Yeah.
turns it from the 90.3 all the way up to the 105 point something.
Yeah.
It's just so important because what we're talking about is presence.
Mhm.
And I think that's what we lose when we have all these things. Because if I look at my calendar, I'm like, I have 3, 4, 5 things going on that are major events and
Yeah.
these things, and I'm like, I think one of the things when you asked me earlier what helped me get out of that hole and what you
Mhm.
can do today too, those of you that are watching, is learn to compartmentalize things to some extent. And I admit that's not always easy when we have multiple priorities, but if you
Right.
can visually, like if you close your eyes and you visually look at your day as compartments, if you've ever seen a drawer organizing system and it has rows and columns of drawers,
Mhm.
and you think about, oh, I'm getting up in this drawer, and I know that the way I start my day impacts the entire day. It impacts how I feel. It impacts how I breathe. It even probably impacts the food that I eat and the
Mhm.
things that I drink and consume. So I'm going to choose today to get up in the gratitude drawer.
Wow.
And then after we get up, we have to do things like brush our teeth, maybe take a shower, maybe eat breakfast. If you have kids, get the kids ready. Do you see how you can start to like, so you can slow that down,
Yeah.
and you can even keep that gratitude drawer open while you go into the next thing. And what it helps us to do is because I found 20 years ago, I was a very selfish person, and I'm still working on aspects of that today. And I think we all do as long as we're here.
Yes.
Um, but I think if we can, my dad used to do this. So he dealt with alcoholism after the Vietnam War and stuff.
Mhm.
But what he would do is he would go, and I'll tie it back to the drawer system in a second.
Okay.
And so he would go on Thanksgiving and Christmas because people would come into these different clubs when they wanted, they may have gone out and got drunk or whatever
Mhm.
they did, and they come back, and he would be waiting there for them. And let me tell you, these are tough people to deal with. So my dad would sit there and be present with them, and he wouldn't shame them. He wouldn't make them feel guilty. It's just, well, do you want to get sober? I'm here for you. And aren't you lucky that somebody's here for you right now? Because I imagine, I know in my state when I was like that, I think people wanted to be there for me, but they didn't know how.
Right.
And I think again, it comes back to presence. So going back to the drawer system, if you can start your day with the gratitude drawer, and then you think, well, okay, now I have to go into the kitchen, let's say, and start making coffee. And then I'm going to go into the bathroom. That's a different drawer, and brush my teeth and do whatever we do there. And then come out of that drawer, close that drawer, and come back into the kitchen. It's kind of a lot of opening and closing drawers, but I think if we can, this isn't something I developed in a day. This has taken me years to get really good at this. But to do it where you're at right now, is just to imagine when you're waking up, just slowly opening that drawer, and maybe even have sunlight coming out of that drawer and feel the warmth of the
Wow.
sunlight
Beautiful.
and feel what you feel when you're in joy.
Yeah.
It's really hard to frown and get upset when you're thinking about joy and sunlight and nourishment and things like
Yes.
that, right?
Yes. Yeah, that is so true. I just had a great visual when you said that, opening up that drawer and having sunlight coming out of it.
Mhm.
Because even just that one exercise, like when you get up, if you could do that, if you're not feeling that, if you could just even visualize that, just
Mhm.
opening up that drawer, and then all this sunlight and warmth and love flowing out of it. I mean, wow, right? And, um, I mean, use your imagination. It's like, I'm a big anime and manga fan, but like,
Mhm.
for me, I was like, oh, that's so magical, right? You just open up and all these, like I was thinking all these, fun creatures come out and they come and play with you.
That's awesome.
I know that's my crazy imagination. I'm like, oh, that's kind of like Pokemon's coming out, and then they can all be with you all day long, and be your support system, right? I mean, you could use your imagination to whatever it works for you, but like that image of sunlight and the warmth that produces is such a big thing. And thank you for sharing that because I'm sure our viewers can utilize that for if they're or even if you're not when you're just getting up, but anytime that you're feeling a little down, just open up
Yeah.
that drawer of sunlight and say, and feel it for just even if it takes you just 2 or 3 minutes, go into the bathroom and take time for yourself. Take a deep breath and imagine yourself opening up that drawer.
Mhm.
Or it could be just a gift, you're opening up a gift and it's a gift that you're giving yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be anything you want it to be. It doesn't have to be a drawer. It could be a gift. It could be anything.
Mm-hmm.
It could be an anime character that's like coming out and morphing into different
Yeah.
things. That's cool.
Yeah. That's me and my crazy anime things.
No, I love it because I'm actually into anime as well. I used
Oh,
to watch a show called Cowboy Bebop, and there are a few other
yes.
ones that are really cool. And just the joy, and I think there is a lot of laughter in anime in general. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's so cool. And I think I just want to say this before I miss it is you can take this, it's kind of like an anchor or a trigger is what we
Yes.
call it in our world.
Hmm.
You can take this box or this drawer or this gift or whatever it is for you, and when you get in those moments where it starts to spin out or however that shows up for you internally, for me, I think things literally start to spin and then I'm like, oh, well, I have to reverse the spin and get it to a still place
Mm.
again. You can use this anytime to trigger yourself to come back
Yeah.
to this peaceful state. Like if your kids are yelling at you, you can like, I know it's not always easy to be like, okay, pause kids, but you can imagine like, and this is where if you practice this and rehearse this over time,
Yeah.
multiple times, like rehearse it and practice it when you're not in the moments.
Yes.
So it's like when sports players like practice before the big game, they
Yes.
practice over and over and over.
Yes.
Even simple things like in baseball, like swinging the bat,
Right.
they'll practice that motion. It's muscle memory over time. And
Exactly.
so like when you're in that moment where like if your kids are yelling at you or your puppies are barking at you, because yes, our puppies are amazing. They're about, let's see, they were born in August, so September, October, November. They're about 3 months old,
Oh,
but sometimes they bark at 5 something in the morning.
I know.
So,
Believe me, I know.
and I think that it's real easy to be like, oh, I want my sleep. And, that's real, right? We need
All
sleep
right.
like we talked about. But so what we've been able to do is kind of use things like this to trigger ourselves to be patient with them and say, oh, they're puppies. They're three
Right.
months old. They're learning. They want attention or they're hungry.
Yeah.
And so now we've been able to like put the kennel in the room with us, and they don't bark at 5 in the morning. They wait till we get up. And so I think what this does when you can allow yourself to come back to this place of stillness, it generates that creativity.
Yes. Yes, it does. And you can create your world so that it works for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things that once you start getting that grounding and like anchoring is such an important thing that we always do. Like, I think at this point, you and I, like, we just ground ourselves or anchor ourselves with something all the time, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I know when I'm like, I really want something to feel important to me, I do this. And
Mm.
it's not like out for, in your face this, but
Yeah.
what I'll do is I'll create that fist and tap my hip so that no one sees it, right? But it's for me to say anchor. It's like anchoring it back into me, the
Mm-hmm.
peace back into me, the calm. And I think I do it unconsciously that I don't even realize I do it until somebody points it out. And I think it's little things like that. And if you can do it like kind of like brushing your teeth, right? Once you start doing it, it's a habit that you brush your teeth first thing in, well, I don't know, first thing in the morning, but you brush your teeth in the morning and you brush it before you go to sleep. So those are two things. And to relate it to something that we do every day, it's something like that. Or if you put on a pair of shoes that have laces, you're going to naturally tie them up, right? And that's like
Mhm.
something that's automatic, and you want to keep on repeating something that's a good habit to be automatic for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think especially, if you think about Tony Robbins or Joseph McClendon III, like sometimes people are like, well, I want to be like them, but I'm not them. It's like we don't have to be. That
Oh.
that that's where like you can get into similar states because like we talk about having we call it a rebounder in our world, but the trampoline, a mini trampoline
Hmm.
basically. And we were just going through a program recently where just simply getting on it and putting on a song and you can do an identity statement or
Yeah.
whatever you want you can
Hmm.
create around it, but I found like just jumping on it and putting my hands in the air and just I listen to Celebration by Kool and the Gang and I'm like,
Yes.
celebrate good times, come on. And I could be like in the most terrible mood in the world, but in an instant that changes that whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like boom,
Yep.
now I'm celebrating. I don't know what I'm celebrating, but I'm celebrating.
You're celebrating life. You're celebrating the fact that you're awake.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you don't have a rebounder or trampoline, you could just do this by
You can
jump
jump.
jumping up and down, or even if you can't even do that, just put on the music and just move your body any way
Hmm.
that you can, because that alone is going to bring that energy to you.
Yeah.
And because I know some people are like, well, I don't have a rebounder. What am I going to do? How am I going to do
Hmm.
this? Right? There are ways, be resourceful, as Tony
Yeah.
Robbins says, find another way for you to do it, because nothing has to be perfect. It doesn't have to be exactly
Mhm.
that. It has to be what's going to work for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that simple thing you could do. I know somebody that actually shadow boxes because he doesn't have a trampoline and it works
Yeah.
for him.
Yeah.
And I think that, even if you kind of just bounce up and down in place like that,
Yep.
like it still does the same thing.
Yep.
And
And
just,
even like marching in place like
yeah.
this. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Could
And so,
do
like,
that.
if you're ever at work too, I did a presentation a couple months ago or semi recently
Hmm.
where I thought about how do I there's a technique that we learned and it's emotional management basically. How
Hmm.
do we stop the thoughts at the root and then create what we want in
Right.
that blank spot? And so I was like, if somebody's sitting at work and they're not able to yell something out because they might freak out the whole office,
Yes.
what can they do? And like it's super simple. So if you're ever sitting there and you need to be silent, you can think of the radio dial thing. So if you're like I work with spreadsheets sometimes and data and marketing type things, and sometimes it's like it's important, but it makes your eyes glaze over when you
Yeah.
look at it for too long.
Yep.
So if you just change where you're looking and you look in the like up and to whatever place you want to look at, just look straight up, and you imagine you're turning the radio dial to that can be joy, that can be happiness, that can be calm, that can be peace, whatever you want it to be, but just change the radio dial to like for me it'll be joy right now, and then like
Hmm.
I think of a crazy emoji face that's like and like if I needed to be silent instead of making that noise, I would just be like shaking my face out real quick and just
Right.
looking, and then I could say to myself, I'm thankful for being joyful right now. And then just went from what could have been overwhelmed with all these numbers and data to I'm back to a place of stillness, which helps me be creative, which let's
Yeah.
get back into it.
Yeah. And
So,
it's so true. I mean, thank you for sharing that. And I think our viewers can, really utilize that. It's such a simple technique that we can use just to shift it out of where you are,
mhm,
and changing that, just looking elsewhere. Like I remember as a kid, no, my parents would say, don't always be looking here, look elsewhere sometimes, or, just for your eyes to rest. They say,
mhm,
look outside for a bit, or do something else. And I think that is really changing your focus. That's what it is all about. changing your focus so that sometimes when you're focused on one thing for so long, it is overwhelming.
Mhm.
So shift it, even if you just go like this, shift and then think of something else, or look at a different place. Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
right? That alone, I mean, people are like, "What is she doing?" or whatever. But if it's going to be helpful in an office, I would say, like you did, close your eyes and just look up for a bit and just look elsewhere. Change that where your what do you call your perspective by
Mhm.
just looking elsewhere. And even if it's just looking at the floor, maybe, or saying, "Oh, did I wear these shoes today?" or, or looking at something in the corner and saying, "Oh, I never noticed that plant in the corner." I don't know. Or looking out, if you have a window, look out the window, maybe. But
Yeah.
just changing that little bit can make a big difference in how you perceive things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think to kind of sum up some things,
Yes.
big picture things into bringing it back down to earth, I think we've talked about anchoring and triggering and focusing. And I think this, again, the simple question, what do I want?
Yes.
And I think another thought that came to mind as we were talking about all this, Yayoi, was,
Mm-hmm.
am I enough? And everything that, of course, we want more and we want to
Of course.
to be more, to do more, to have more. I think when it comes to having more, it's important to ask yourself why. What's the point?
Yeah.
What does this thing do for me? What does it give me?
Yeah.
For me, what I've been able to do, like I have a sweatshirt that's on the way, and the front of it, it says, "You are enough." And on the back, it says, "Dear person behind me, the world is a better place with you in it."
Oh, that's sweet. I love that.
Because I thought, well, I don't always have an opportunity to talk to people. What can I do to still encourage and inspire people that you're enough right now? And I think we as humans have a tendency, well, if I don't get these 17 things on my list done, I'm not enough today. Well, you probably did the three things and they probably got you some results, right?
Yeah.
So you are enough. You brought yourself to this day. And even if it's not 100%, you brought, maybe like some people deal with autoimmune issues. Some people, maybe we didn't eat well or we didn't drink enough, whatever it is. We can be enough right now, knowing we brought ourselves to whatever we did today.
Yes.
And we can take that could be the one thing you're grateful for before you go to bed tonight.
Yeah.
I am enough because I showed up today.
That is more than enough for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And, remember that you showing up may have made a big difference for one person or
Hmm.
multiple people. So remember that, because I think we tend to forget, when we isolate, we tend to forget the impact that we have on others, because you have that term, no man is an island, and it's true.
Hmm.
We all exist for each other and with each other. So our energy, like even if it was just an interaction you had in the elevator, let's say, with someone, and you smiled and said, "Good morning,"
Hmm.
that could have been the best thing that happened to that person that morning.
Yeah.
And it could have brought joy to that person. That person may have had a horrible morning. They got up late. I don't know. I don't know why I thought this, but maybe they had a terrible drive into the office. Somebody cut them off and things like that. And a lot of this, stress, right? And then
Hmm.
just by you saying good morning to them could have brought them the calm that they needed and the smile that they needed.
Yeah.
So you never know. You never know what impact you have on another person.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, wow. I think we covered so much today. So
Hmm.
Matthew, sorry.
No.
Let's see. I know, are you working on anything in particular right now with neuroencoding, or is there anything that you'd like to promote so that people know what you're doing or how to get in touch with you and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity. I think there's a way I could share my screen real quick and I could show you. We have a quick thing. We wanted to give you guys a gift.
Oh, I don't know.
Actually,
I don't know if you could share the screen,
let's see.
but
Can you
if you
see?
no, no. but you
Okay.
can mention it. And oh, now you can, special gift for you. Okay.
Okay, yeah, we have if you go to neuroencoding.com/gift-edge-MD, we have a program that Joseph created. It's called the Neuroencoding Edge. And if you're interested in learning more about neuroencoding and how it can help you, we have a friends and family deal that's happening right now because we know that the world needs us to learn this kind of technology to
Right.
change our world so then we can change the world. So that'll come straight to me. That doesn't go to anybody else. And even if you wanted to have a conversation about where you're at and where you want to go, feel free to just opt in there, and I will definitely make sure that we get you taken care of. Just because we wanted to give you a gift, make sure you walked away with something you could use, something that's valuable to you. So you'll see our mentor, Joseph McLennan III. The Neuroencoding Edge is just basically an introduction to what neuroencoding is. There's no catch. There's nothing we're going to try and get from you. We're totally here to support you.
Yeah.
We have an amazing team of people that we provide world-class support for you. We just want to make sure, if you're going through something, you can use even the simple technologies that Joseph will show you
Yeah.
to use in your life today.
Yeah. And
That's
it's
just,
really like a lot of what we talked about, that you'll get more detailed instructions on how to use that, use those techniques.
mhm,
And I mean, I've used that ever since I've learned it. That's been like part of my life. Now it's part of my lifestyle. So, okay. Anyway, so thank you very much, Matthew, for coming today. And I really enjoyed you being here. And please reach out to Matthew. He's on Facebook,
mhm.
and he's also Freedom Alchemy. I think
Yes.
that's your thing. Yes.
Mhm.
So, just to wrap everything up, just to say thank you very much. And this show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. And visit my YouTube channel if you get a chance. It's at B2Belly and Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Haley.